Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode, we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great tackle! He's done it! Oh, brilliant play! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Didi! It's a goal, 4 for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Penny.
This week our guest is Adrian Duncan. Adrian's an artist, a novelist and a short story writer, and his latest book is a collection of short stories called Midfield Dynamo, and we'll talk about that later on. Thanks for coming on, Adrian.
Thank you very much for having me. Delighted to be here.
Yep, thank you very much for joining us. This week we've got a match magazine from the 21st of October 1989.
All righty, so we'll have a wee look at the cover first of all. Tony Cascarino and Andy Townsend celebrating a goal for the Republic of Ireland over Northern Ireland, which almost certainly guarantees a place in the finals. There's a picture of Terry Butcher and Gary Stevens in the Red England away kit, again celebrating after an England victory that sees them go to the World Cup finals 1990. Here we go. England are Italy bound, pages 2 and 3. And there's a Skull Cup final preview. Cover price is 50 pence. So first thing to ask, Adrian, did you buy Match or Shoot around this era when you were young?
You know, it's funny. I think I probably had friends who bought these kind of magazines, but it wasn't until World Cup '90 that I actually started very, very seriously collecting stickers. Right. You might remember the Orbis, sort of the big. What do you call it? The clip folder of World Cup '90 trivia and stickers and what have you, and that came out. I think it would have been, I suppose, early 1990, before the actual World Cup itself started, and before even the teams in each group were pulled out of the pot. So it was all a little bit scattergun, but most of the teams that were kind of that you could buy in the weekly editions had all qualified. So yeah, that was the one.
All right, so on the cover there's Tony Cascarino and Andy Townsend there for Ireland. Any memories of that particular game, Adrian? That was the
no, I do. I remember very, very clearly the '88 European Championships. I would have been 10 at the time, and it would have been obviously our first major competition. And I don't think either of these two players are actually playing the '88 finals. I remember vividly because it was the first time I probably went to a pub I'm from the middle of Ireland, a place called County Longford. And when Ireland were playing England, I think it was the first game of the '88 European Championships. This was obviously a very, very big game. And my father had said to my mother, we were on holidays over on the west coast of Ireland, and he said that he wanted to go back up home to I think it was to do some sort of work or some sort of made up story like that. And I was kind of aware of this, and I just can I come up and help you. So I remember going up to Ballymahon, my hometown, and we watched the England game. The actual jerseys were very similar to the jerseys that are on the top of the cover of this Match magazine here. I actually had one of those jerseys. They were gorgeous. Yeah. And I remember when beforehand Brian Clough was very, very sure that England were going to beat Ireland, and I think the general feeling amongst the English press was that they were going to roll Ireland over. And I remember Liam Brady, who was, I think, injured for the '88 European Championships, was working for BBC, and he gave Brian Clough a bit of lip back live on air about how he'd much prefer have Ireland centre half pairings than England. And I remember Ray Houghton, a good Scottish Irishman, scored the goal. I think it was like in the 12th minute or something like that. And oh man, the stress! Like even though I was kind of young, like whatever, whatever, I was about 10, I suppose at the time. I remember that was my first time of that chronic feeling of stress that you have when you're under the cosh for 80 minutes, and you really don't want to lose. And I remember Packy Bonner had he was playing for Celtic at the time, and he had an absolutely brilliant game. And I remember Gary Lineker just could not get the ball past him. It was sort of like Oliver Kahn in 2002 or something like that. He was you just couldn't get the ball past him. And then at the end, we won. I remember the absolute elation in the pub, and grown men, my father's friends, like crying and all this kind of stuff. And I remember when Bobby Robson came out on the screen, God bless him, with a tear in his eye over this horrendous loss. And I remember the cheer that went up the pub was complete. So it was probably my first real experience of that kind of football, but particularly soccer adulthood. And because where I'm from, Gaelic football is a much bigger sport, naturally in the town. And it was really only those competitions in 1988 and 1990 that more and more people in rural Ireland actually started watching more and more football. Like when I say football, like soccer. Like there would have been a period of time even in the 70s when I was growing, and in the 80s when I was growing up, when soccer was actually banned from playing. You weren't allowed to play it. Or if you played it, you weren't allowed to play Gaelic football. Because the Gaelic football, the politics of the Gaelic football was so strong, and the sense of an Irish identity was so strong that the Gaelic games were an integral part of it. So there was this sort of weird absence of formal soccer, let's say, formal football in the Midlands and in certain parts of rural Ireland. And so these games and these people, particularly Cascarino and Townsend and these kinds of folk, these dynamic and interesting and actually English-born footballers, playing for Ireland, it was a really sort of exciting and strange something strange thing to get your head around, even at that young age, But yeah, brilliant times, very, very, very brilliant times. Yeah, Jack Charlton, of course, is at the helm at the time.
Yeah, so I'll have a wee look at that. There's a wee bit more on that Ireland game inside. So there's not very much going on the front cover. Usually front covers of the magazines, there's a lot going on, but there's really not very much here at all. Anything, Andy, you want to pick out of that cover?
I just want to point out that it says, we said there's a photograph of Gary Stevens there. I mean, it's barely a photograph of Gary Stevens, isn't it? It's the back of his head as he's been cuddled by Terry Butcher there. And what other prices have we got? We've got Singapore $2.75, Spain 200 pesetas, HFL. What did we work out that was before? Was that in the Netherlands?
Oh, the Hungarian Florian. Could it be something like that?
Yeah. That sounds about right. The Deutschmark 350. And era 77 pence. It's always more expensive, isn't it? Always more expensive.
About that. But that's long gone. The Irish punt, Jesus, that's gone since whatever. Was it 2001 or 2 when the Euro came in throughout Europe? That's when that was gone. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But other than that, as you say, there's a lack of things on the front end. But you don't need it when you've got a big colour photograph of the Irish celebrating. That's good enough for me.
All right, so we turn over into the magazine then. So the first pages 2 and 3, it's Italy, here we come, and this is England. So this is a big picture of Peter Shilton there in a sort of blue goalkeeper's jersey, a blue sort of zigzag shadow stripe goalkeeper's jersey, and a wee insert there of Bobby Charlton, classic picture of Bobby Charlton. But we must improve, warns Charlton.
I love how they couldn't find a colour photograph of him. They had to go with black and white.
Yeah. It's like it's just to sort of overemphasize the point that this guy's from the past.
Yeah.
So we'll not dwell too long on England qualifying for the 1990 World Cup there, but I don't know, anything you want to pick out, Adrian, from those.
In the England bits, let me see. Well, I know just one thing that caught my eye there is the lovely 3-tone Italian 90 football, the sort of the screen print thing. That was the what would you call it? It was kind of the logo or whatever sort of thing. That when I saw that the first time there, when you sent me over the mag or the scan, I was like, oh Jesus, I haven't seen that for a long time. And like I remember like those colors as well, like the red, white, and green. And I remember after Italia 90, they started showing that Italian football on RT2 in Ireland. I actually think it predated it coming out on Channel 4.
Right, yeah.
I think we actually had it for a season or two before, and I remember just being utterly mesmerised at the utter difference of the game compared to the English game at the time that I would have been watching more often, you know.
Yeah, just interesting wee things. Picture of Peter Shilton in his goal. I was just going to point out behind. It's an advert for Farah. Farah trousers.
Yeah, my God. Yeah. I used to own a pair of them.
I mean, this whole page isn't doing much for fashion, is it? Whether it's Bobby at the top or that sort of Harlequin type goalkeeper thing that's going on. Yeah, not the greatest of periods, I have to say.
No.
No, it's and just down the side there, look at how we got there, and it's a list of the England's qualifying results to get through. There's a couple of 0-0 draws in there, and England 3, Poland 0, England 5, Albania 0. Typical sort of English group where they just kind of walk it, and they barely lost a goal all the way through that.
A lot of 0-0s though. I mean, they drew at Sweden twice 0-0, and they drew at Poland once 0-0.
Well, I mean, that certainly went through into the World Cup itself, didn't it? That just seemed to maybe be that time where games were pretty tight and not many goals being scored in the international level.
Mm-hmm. It looks like against in the final game or the second last game against Poland that Pearce was playing centre half with Walker, and that Butcher would have been playing left back, I presume, then, would he? Or maybe Pearce was playing left back that game and Butcher was centre half with Walker. Geez, that must have been a very young Des Walker then playing that. No?
Yeah.
He must have been with Nottingham Forest at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, and David Rocastle as well. Geez, I mean, the midfield, when you look at it, Robson, McMahon, Rocastle, Beardsley, like Waddle, geez, it's a pretty good midfield, isn't it?
Yeah. They talent through their squad at that time. For abundance,
it's a robust team there. Like, you forget how good Beardsley was. He was astonishing. Such a talented player. I remember I saw him once in Dublin Airport and I was really amazed. Actually, he's quite stocky, but he's small enough. I thought he'd be, I don't know, I had him pictured as being a bit bigger, but that's a tremendous midfield. David Rocastle, he was playing for Arsenal at the time, wasn't he? He was a really, really important player for them. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just noticing. I was looking for considering how the World Cup went. I was just looking for Gascoigne, and it looks as though he's came on a sub a few of the games and not a regular at that point. That's true. So.
Yeah, he looked like a fringe player during the actual the qualifications. He scored a goal against Albania anyway, that's for sure. And it says here, Gaza gets his name on the score sheet with a cracker on his debut. 2 minutes to go. So the Albania game was his debut back in 1989. So wow.
All right, well, we go over the page then. Here we go. It's here we go. So this is a colour photograph special of the Republic of Ireland beating Northern Ireland 3-0 in the qualifier that sealed their place at Italia 1990. So this game was kicked off at 1 o'clock at Lansdowne Road. Because Lansdowne Road didn't have floodlights at the time. Actually, I watched this whole game's on YouTube. I watched it the other day there.
Wow, jeepers! No, we were. I mean, at that time, because the Northern Ireland had gone to the '86 World Cup, and they'd been, to the '82 World Cup, and they were in the '86 World Cup as well. Yeah, remarkable run. But they didn't make the '88 European Championships. And I think there was a feeling because the North, obviously, by qualifying for these major championships, there was a sort of feeling of superiority, obviously, in the north compared to the south of Ireland. And once Jack took over then in '87, he was so much more wily than the previous Irish managers. I mean, I'd say Johnny Giles was probably a very good Irish manager, and Owen Hand was good as well, but they didn't have the kind of international smarts that Jack Charlton seemed to bring, or that kind of pragmatic view of how to just win games against national teams. And you could feel around this time that there was a sort of a power shift, as it were, between the north and the south. And we probably just had a few more better players. Like John Aldridge was playing brilliantly for Liverpool at the time. Ray Houghton was playing for Liverpool at the time. Ronnie Whelan was playing for Liverpool at the time. I think Kevin Moran was still with Manchester United. And Paul McGrath was still playing probably for Manchester United as well. So if I liken the sort of talent that was in that team now to what we have now, we don't have one player other than Caoimhín Kelleher in the sort of top half of the English Premiership. And he's not even playing regularly. So the sort of the players that Jack partly brought in through the grandmother and grandfather rule, but also it was just his time. There was loads of really, really good players in the Irish team, right the way from goals all the way up front. And I think the emergence of people like Cascarino and Niall Quinn, they came into the team because of Jack Charlton's style, this kind of thing of get it forward as quickly as possible and look for a knock on in their last third, and then if you want to play in there, but otherwise, there's no playing out from midfield, and I think that's why Liam Brady was eventually kind of given the heave ho, because he was such a beautiful footballer, but he wasn't Jack Charlton's style of footballer at all, and by now he was kind of gotten rid of nearly by Jack Charlton. But I mean, the thing about it is, it was really, really exciting, but then there were loads and loads of deeply, deeply boring games as well for an Ireland fan. At this time, it was just so exciting because we had never won this many games before. We'd never qualified for anything before either. This game was played in Lansdowne Road. I remember I used to go to Lansdowne Road as well an awful lot when I was younger. Now, I probably would have been in the mid-90s before I would have actually gone to Lansdowne Road. We used to play in Dalymount Park, Ireland, before that, which was a small park up on the north side, but it's one of those old kind of stadia where you could fit, 35,000 people standing, or maybe even 40 or 50 people standing, but it wouldn't have been safe in the post-Heysel and post in that kind of world. So Lansdowne Road was the old rugby stadium essentially, and it was a very, very old school stadium. And when you were there, if you were in the east stand, there's a railway running directly underneath the actual stand itself. So every 10 minutes you can feel they're called the dart line, and the dart line would go underneath and you could feel it like shuddering up through the seats, and it was like having like there was some sort of commotion going on further down the stand. But the atmosphere in this place was absolutely unbelievable. It's way better than the Aviva Stadium. The atmosphere here was brilliant. Yeah, it was a brilliant stadium to go to. And sometimes because they used to play rugby on it, the pitch wouldn't be great. And of course, if the likes of Spain or a really nice football team were coming, Jack wouldn't make any efforts to make the pitch less bobbly, So it was a pretty agricultural feel to it sometimes. But as he himself, a lot of people didn't like watching us, but most people playing us hated playing us, and that was the sort of key to him. That was the approach he took. That's that. No, so then that just left us Malta to play. Yeah. And then that was us through. And I think we always fancied our chances against Malta because they were, even though we got beaten 5-2 with them when Steve Staunton was in charge. But back in the day before that, they would have been a team that we would have seen as, beatable from our point of view. Yeah. So there would have been like a real confidence about going through after this game.
Just have a wee look at that Ireland team. So it was Packy Bonner, Chris Morris, Steve Staunton, Mick McCarthy, who was the captain, Kevin Morn, Ronnie Whelan, Andy Townsend, Ray Houghton, John Aldridge, Tony Cascarino, Kevin Sheedy, and David O'Leary came on as a sub.
Yeah. Now I remember Kevin Sheedy. He was playing for Everton, I think, at the time, and he had an absolute wand of a left boot. He was actually over managing more recently in Ireland in the Irish League. He was with Waterford United, but I think he's left since. But I remember he scored a goal against England in the World Cup in 1990. We were drawn with them again in the group stages. And I remember, I think it was Gary Lineker scored early in the game, and then about 10 or 15 minutes from the end, Steve McMahon took an awful touch on the edge of the box and poured out to Kevin Sheedy, and he hammered it with his left foot back into the left of Shilton. I remember it was one of the first times that I went absolutely berserk on a goal going in. Even more so, it would have been even 2 years more meaningful than say the European Championships. And even at that age, you were sort of aware of a sort of anti-English sentiment going through what it meant to be an Ireland supporter. So beating England was sort of it was a very, very big deal. I remember running around the house about 5 or 6 times when that happened. He was a brilliant player. I mean, like that. That's like a really good team. I think Chris Morris was playing for Celtic at the time.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
And I think, what's his name? I think Mick McCarthy was possibly playing for Celtic at the time.
Yeah, and he was with Leon actually at that point.
Leon, yeah. And Packy Bonner was playing with Celtic at the time, wasn't he? Yeah. I remember Chris. I mean, I've completely lost. Usually, I look into the sort of the histories of all of these footballers. I'm really fascinated in terms of how and what happened or where they went. And I never looked into what Chris Morris is doing. I have no idea what he's kind of up to these days. But he was a really tidy footballer himself at the time. And he would have played in a way that Jack definitely would have wanted his fullbacks playing, like when the ball comes to them, getting it back up to pitch, and none of this dropping deep to take it off the goalkeeper, any of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's funny because this was the last World Cup before the back pass rule came in. Because I remember at the end of World Cup 90, there was a sort of concern bringing a game of this kind over to the US might not be sort of flowing or exciting enough. And there were a lot of instances in that World Cup 90 where there was like just the ball being kicked back to the keeper, picking it up, bouncing it, it killed the game a lot. I remember when we played Holland, both of us were through, and the last 10 minutes of that game, sure, it was just the two keepers kicking up and down to each other. And like, it was kind of, for anyone, any neutral looking on would just be like, this is an awful game of football. For us, it was obviously brilliant. But I remember that Packy Bonner was particularly good at kicking the ball out of his hands. And I think there's partly because he would have played a lot of Gaelic football as a young fella up in Donegal. And that's obviously part and parcel of how it's like a basic pass in Gaelic football, kicking it out of your hands. But I often think sometimes of what Packy Bonner would be like now as a goalkeeper these days if you just plucked him out of the past and put him into the present. That kind of idea of grimacing and booting a ball 60 yards up a pitch would just be, it would be like something from a different century, But of course it is from a different century. But I remember there was a goalkeeper that I used to know in my hometown. It's a guy called Lal Donnellan. And he played for Longford Town, what have you, when he was younger. But he said that he had also he'd been with Arsenal for about a year. He's a particularly good golfer, and my old lad used to play golf, and I used to caddy for him. And I just found this Lal fella really, really interesting. He was an older man at the time, but I remember one time he told me that he'd gone over for trials to Arsenal, and the way he described his game, it was, I was good at coming out, catching the ball over the heads of 5 or 6 fellas, and kicking it as far down the pitch as I could. And like that to him were the skills of the goalkeeper. And I think like that was still the case more or less up until there were the metrics of you'd measure a goalkeeper's value up until that back pass rule came in. And then I think it's only really now that the game is called properly with that back pass rule in the UK and Ireland and parts of Europe. The back pass rule has such a huge effect on the game,
You wonder why, what's suddenly changed that we start playing. I know that's because you can pass inside the box from a goal kick, and that seems to have been the catalyst for this style of play from the back. Really, really short play from the back, and you just wonder why teams weren't doing it before to that degree. And maybe it's because players have developed enough that they have this skill. That they can take the ball in under pressure and pass it about from there. But it's just sometimes I find it really strange just thinking about how the game develops and how new things happen. You think, well, nothing else can change the way the game is played, and then suddenly something happens and it's changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely one of the things that the back pass rule would have been, I think just the way goalkeepers would have been, because the way it's such a Victorian game, football, in many ways, or at least it was, and that everyone's got their kind of role, and they're sort of orchestrated to produce a sort of, it's like a sort of factory floor where everyone's got a different skill. A left back has got a slightly different skill set to say a striker. A striker's good at putting the ball in the net, getting his head on it, or whatever it is. And I just think part of it is just people have different roles. It's almost like a sort of unionized work or something like that. That is like, you do that, and I think that's why. That's why I think goalkeepers, it was so, because I remember when that rule came in, there was a couple of years of like almost comedic football when the ball was being rolled back to the goalkeeper. And it was just, they were just trying to get a foot on it to get it clear, because the pitches would have been bobbly around the goal mouth and all that kind of stuff as well. Yeah. And it was just such a gamble, sort of rolling the ball back to the keeper for him to sort of play it out or anything like that. But yeah, it's really interesting to see those patterns and how the developments in the game. I think it's absolutely fascinating, because it sort of reflects the world, the changes in the world to a certain degree as well,
So, and just staying with Ireland for a moment, you touched on it briefly there, Adrian, that the sort of Irish team at the moment is not going through a particularly good spell. Any sort of thoughts on why that might be?
Yeah, oh God, it's a strange one. I think I mean, the first and foremost, like in the last few games since Stephen Kenny took over, um, apart from the trials and tribulations with COVID and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of first team players we have that you know, like the best players, let's say, who are playing for the clubs near to the top. A lot of them aren't actually playing week in, week out. So they're in this sort of, there'll be a good few of them that were in this sort of in-between zone of not being in the reserves and not being in the first team. So they're actually on the bench most weekend. And it just, then when you come back to start playing for Ireland, you're just not, you might be fit, but you're not match fit. Like I remember, for instance, Callum Robinson, who during the last international break, in the first game he came back and played, he looked exhausted after about 30 minutes. And I think then he got Stephen Kenny gave him 3 games. And then when he went back to West Brom at the end of getting a bit of some game time, he started banging them in left, right, and centre for West Brom. Like, he's a very good player, I think, Callum Robinson. But he's just not he wasn't at the time getting first team football. Now he has since. And I think that's a big part of it, that a lot of the players that would make up Stephen Kenny's ideal first 11 aren't actually playing week in, week out. Like Jeff Hendrick could be another one. He's in Newcastle. He hasn't started, I don't think, for 4 months. Robbie Brady, the same. Like there's just Seamus Coleman, who's probably our best player. You know, he's not even on the first team every single week, even though he probably should. And it's just, if you through the whole team, there's just so few of them that are actually playing first team at a high level regularly. And I think also the style of football Stephen Kenny's style of football is really, really different to what the style of football that Ireland has played over the last, say, even last decade. So if you could think back to maybe Trapattoni to now. So the thing was that because Ireland, the FAI, were being... have you read Champagne Football, the book that came out last year about John Delaney's reign of the FAI? It's absolutely horrible. It's a brilliant book, but it's a kind of it's a really difficult read because of the teeming level of waste and misspending of money. And I think an awful lot of it was that because of the development of the new stadium led to a sort of a lack of funds for the FAI generally, that we had to qualify for World Cups and European Championships because of the financial windfall, the chunk of money that would come in and kept the FAI going. I think it led to a very, very pragmatic series of managers being taken on. It's like, your job is to get Flot to that tournament. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And it led to basically a decade of really horrible, horrible football to watch from a supporter's point of view. And I remember, like, say, for instance, when Trapattoni got us to the European Championships, I think it was 2012, I remember watching the 3 group games, and it was so embarrassing. We got absolutely hockeyed in every single one of them. I remember my dad said to me after the 3 games, and we were kicked out of the tournament, absolutely didn't lay a paw on anyone. My dad said, we wouldn't have done any worse if we tried to play football. And he was right. But it was ingrained in the team, like that was Trapattoni's method. And the FAI knew what they were doing, taking on someone like Trapattoni. It wasn't going to be trying to instill a style or an identity of football. And that has happened since with success. We've qualified, but it's corporate qualifications. It's not qualifications with a view to producing a type of football that you might associate with football that's even good, but even with Ireland or whatever, it's just what'll get us there, you know? And I think Stephen Kenny, he can be pragmatic when he wants, but he definitely has an attitude towards playing attractive football. Like when I was younger, I played very, very briefly for Longford Town back in the early 2000s. I trained with the first team and played with the reserves. But I got one run out for the first team in 2000. Was it 2000? Yeah. And I was playing against a small club called Home Farm. It was a League Cup game or something like that. I came on as a halftime sub, and we were 2-0 down. And the person who scored the 2 goals for Home Farm was a young 17-year-old lad who was on loan from Shelburne. And his name was Richie Foran. And he ended up having a brilliant career over in Scotland. He ended up managing Inverness Caledonian Thistle as well for a while. But he was absolutely unbelievable. He was like a man running around the place. He was only 17. But I remember Stephen Kenny, when he was managing Longford Town, he had a real interest in the aesthetics of and what you looked like when you played. So he wasn't just interested in winning, but like what you look like, the the jersey and your shorts. Like, what did that look good? You know, and then the idea of having expressive players was really important to him. And like, he'd always ask lads, you know, because it was all semi-professional football for most of the players there. He'd be asking them, you know, what would you like to do? And I remember one fella said in the dressing room, they'd like to be a hairdresser. And this is sort of comment that might be met with derision, but Steve was just like, that's great, yeah, go and do that. Yeah, that's a brilliant thing to do. So he was just sort of surprising in that way, but he also had a really, really keen and competitive spirit as well. And that's why he's got so far as a manager. Like, he was over, I thought he was quite unlucky in Dunfermline when he was over for that season. He got into a cup final and they just fell short of the of staying up in the Premier Division or the top division. And then I think he was gone after a couple of months next season. But then he did brilliantly with Dundalk in Europe. And I remember when Dundalk made the European the group stages, which was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And now Dundalk were nowhere before this; they were way down the lower end of the division. But when he got them into the Europa League and into the group stages, which is the first time an Irish club has ever done this, instead of just parking 11 at the back, he said, "No, we're going to go out and play them as if we were going to win, as if we're going to show them what we're like." And they actually won a game or two. I think they beat a Polish side, which this is unheard of. Playing a team by playing them off the park, that has never been done by an Irish club before in Europe, or very, very rarely anyway. And so that's always been his attitude, that we will bring our creativity to them. And I think that's what he's trying to do with the Ireland team now. And I think it's very different to what some of the older players are used to. And I think it's the sort of thing that takes a while to blend in. You need time with the players to do it. And he hasn't had any of that. It's been very fractured. And some of the players he doesn't know and some of the players he does know. And it's just been not an ideal situation from the start, but I do have hope in him, at least.
All right, so we turn over the page then and we see how Scotland got on.
Before we go, I just want to have a wee chat about the photographs. So it's very, very colourful photographs, and the thing that springs out to me, so the Republic are in green shirts, white shorts and green socks, and Northern Ireland are in white shirts, green shorts and white socks. That wouldn't happen these days. I mean, how good does it look? In these days,
that's great. Yeah.
In these days, you wouldn't get that because they would say that's a clash. And so I have no idea. What, blue or something would Northern Ireland be wearing? Might be, actually. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think it could well be that. And I think that is their third colour. Yeah. And I just think, so much is, aesthetically is missed from the game now because of things like that. You mentioned also about the pitch. The pitch looks absolutely perfect. I mean, then again, I mean, it may be hiding a few bumps and stuff in there, but overall, the thing I always go, and Tom will tell you about this, the thing I always go on about is older, and we're talking about older than this, maybe 70s to early 80s. What I love about the photos is the blurriness of them. I don't I just think they're so much better than these high definition, crystal clear photos. Yeah. And there's a bit of both with this. I think the foreground's a bit sharper, but the background's blurry, and I think it still works. And I just think they're really good photographs, and I didn't want to go away with it just commenting on that. Yeah, I remember there's a friend of mine actually who he's a photographer himself. He used to work for newspapers. He's gone into film now, but when he was a young fella, he used to work as a sort of an assistant for the Irish Times. And when they were taking photographs at, say, the All Ireland or say games like this, there'd be the photographer there knocking out the reels of photographs, hoping that one of them would work. And my mate Fergal, the photographer, would give him 10 or 15 rolls of photographs. And Fergal had cycled down the Irish Times photography department where they'd develop all of the contact sheets. And then they'd be able to hopefully pick one out and go, yeah, we definitely have one front page image or whatever. But sometimes you used to have to go up and down a few times to the game to get the rolls off the thing. So to produce these photographs, there's a huge amount of actual effort that is completely gone now. Like, because it's just you take on a photograph on a phone or you take it on a camera, you can email it immediately, But yeah, it is lovely. The film photography is gorgeous, for sure. And also the way the text is overlaid, you can see it's been cut out and kind of overlaid and scanned. Like you can see the bit Aero almost certainly booked their ticket to the World Cup.
You can see that's obviously been stuck on at some stage by someone. Yeah, I love that. It's just lovely the way it's done. Yeah,
I would say though, I mean, sometimes where it says how they stand, and I think that's you can't read that. You can't read that. I mean, it's white, a white text over a crowd, and it just doesn't work. They could have done what they did in the other ones and had a bit of a background to that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I love Jack's tweed jacket. Yeah. He's really getting into the there must be some sort of Donegal tweed he's wearing there
now. So we go over the page then. Left hand side, we've got no panic Scotland. So Scotland lost 3-0 to France, and we needed a result against Norway. And picture of Dennis Law, and again, much like that Bobby Charlton picture, it's a picture of Dennis Law from decades earlier. It says footballing legend and veteran of 54 Scotland appearances, and Dennis Law actually got 55 caps for Scotland. Believes that the 3-0 defeat in France has merely delayed his country's progress to the World Cup finals. Let's face it, if you can't get a result against Norway, you don't deserve to go.
My God.
So we drew one each with Norway, and that was enough. Ali McCoy scored, and Erland Jonsson equalised with a minute left to leave us sort of holding on desperately for a couple of minutes, but we did get there.
Great Scotland jersey, that one as well.
Yeah, when McCoist's wearing there, yeah,
cracker. Yeah, I remember because I went to college up in Aberdeen. That's where I studied engineering from 95 to 99. And there's a guy I knew called Steve McCulloch. He was from Aberdeen direction actually. And I remember I think I bought one of his Scotland jersey off him or something like that. He was really good footballer himself. I think he's an accountant now or something. But I had one of those jerseys. I think I have that jersey down at home in my parents' house.
Yeah, it's in probably my top three. It's got the little bit of tartan on the collar and the inside bit as well, and those pop buttons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Celtic jerseys had those pop buttons as well. The C.R. Smith ones. I remember I had one of those as well. Yeah, with the little pop buttons. Yeah.
And if I remember right, it was a really soft, comfortable material on it as well. I always remember that. Definitely brilliant strip.
Just to note there for that Scotland-France game, it says that the game was over when Cantona took advantage in 62 minutes.
Yeah. It's funny here. There's mention also of Gordon Strachan playing his first game for Scotland for 9 months, and since his transfer to Leeds United. So that's obviously when he went on to Leeds, and he must have stayed there until he became player manager then.
Yeah.
Wow.
What I found interesting looking at the Irish group was, I mean, Ireland had a terrible start, didn't they? I mean, the first 3 games they drew 2 and lost 1.
Yeah.
And then they won every game after that, and it was. Yeah. I guess must have just built up the momentum from that point.
Yeah, and I think if drawing a game wasn't such a big disaster back then because it was 1 point for a draw and 2 for a win. Because I was looking at this documentary recently. It's called The Road to the USA, and it was 93, made in 1993. It was Jack Charlton bringing Ireland to the 94 World Cup, and it's shot again. You'd love this because it was all shot on 60mm film. Like you wouldn't see the like of it nowadays, But again, I had completely forgotten about that 2 point for a win and how kind of inconsequential it seems. If you get a draw, it was by far that was getting a result. Whereas getting a draw now, it's like unless the team is way better than you, it's not really seen as much of a result as a win.
Yeah. Do you know, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's made that much of a difference if in terms of where things end up. Because I think I remember looking at, I had nothing to do one night, so I looked at previous league titles and stuff like that, and I worked out, would any of them have changed if it was still 2 points for a win, or if it was 3 points for a win and one back then? And I think out of everything, there was one situation where it would have been a different winner. Every other one was the same. So I think in terms of, playing for something, maybe lower down it becomes more important than it is when teams are actually winning more than they're drawing.
Yeah. I see also Scotland had Yugoslavia in the group, so this was obviously just a couple of years before Yugoslavia broke. broke up. But that would have been an extraordinary Yugoslavian team then, with Prosinecki and Savicevic and all these kinds of players, Mihailovic and all that. The Red Star Belgrade team.
Well, we're actually just we're going to look at the Yugoslavia team later on.
Cool. Okay.
Because I was going to look at your short story. So I asked dig out something with Prosinecki in it. So there's a Yugoslavia team profile we're going to have a wee look at later on.
Okay, cool, great.
All those guys you're talking about. We'll get there in a few pages' time. So on the opposite page, we've got apparently a full-page picture of Steve Staunton of Liverpool.
Which are we know who it is?
It's a fellow called Burrows, isn't it?
David Burrows,
the second name Burrows, wasn't it?
David Burrows.
What was his first? David Burrows. That's it. Yeah. I mean, their colouring is similar. They're both blondes.
That's it, really.
I've been very generous to the picture editor.
But do you know the thing about this is, and I've went on because a lot of my collection, I've got the magazines, but I also collect cards and stickers and stuff, which I collected when I was younger. And my bugbear about things like this is, mistakes are going to happen, but as a kid, you don't know the mistakes. So you grow up, you would grow up thinking, if you didn't know any better, you grow up thinking that's Steve Staunton. I mean, there's a 1977 set of Scottish football cards where there's two Hearts players. One is Cammy Fraser and the other is Sandy Burrell. And they're actually the same person in the photograph. And I just thought they looked similar. But when it's pointed out to you, it's obviously the same person. It's probably from the same photo shoot as well. And it's just things like that, as you get older, you get a wee bit sort of really annoyed about having the wool pulled over your eyes as a kid.
It was funny because with the World Cup 90 manual, a lot of the stickers in it, they weren't like formalized like Panini, where obviously someone from Panini went out and photographed all of the squad properly just from shoulder up or from, say, waist up or whatever. But in the World Cup 90 poster or collecting stickers that I collected, they were just photographs that were all over the place. They were obviously taken from just like, Reuters or whatever and places like that and just used. So you had a whole different host of styles of photographs. I remember that being kind of annoying to me at the time because I think it was a little bit more obsessive, like kind of obsessive compulsive when you're younger about these things. You kind of, don't know if I get so annoyed about it now. But when I was younger, that kind of sticking out.
See, I sort of prefer that. I prefer that than just a formulaic standard. I mean, nowadays the Panini ones, it's like you could basically have a body and just keep changing the head, and it's the same sticker. But I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was either a sticker or a card. I'm sure the guy didn't even have a football strip on. I'm sure he just had his normal, like a jumper on or something like that. And they didn't even make the effort to do their painting, which they did quite a lot. If somebody had moved clubs and they didn't have time to take a new photograph, they would just paint over the kit. And again, us unassuming kids would just think, oh, that's a new kit for this season or something like that. Day glow orange or something. But I much preferred when it was all different. You get action shots and you get ones like that. But there we go. That's my OCD.
So we move on pages 8 and 9. So on page 8 there at the bottom, there's a sort of competition thing that says, "Are you a match for Schultz?" This is week 2 of the Great Quiz competition to find 50 people to face England goalkeeper in a match penalty shootout at the baseball ground in the new year. So the thing is, you've got to phone in and Peter Shilton asks you questions. Yeah, you've got to score against Schilt by answering the questions correctly. The calls cost 38 pence per minute at peak times and 25 pence per minute at all other times. And you must ask your parents' permission. 2 minutes, 20 seconds each call was going to last as well.
And how much was the front? The front cover was 50. I keep equating it to what a magazine costs. So 2 minutes, 20 seconds is what? I mean, close to £1. So you're talking about 2 magazines worth just to have a chance to. What do you win?
It's a chance to take penalties at the baseball grounds.
Yeah. That's worth it.
We're just looking at, so there's a picture of him there in his Derby County football club, and I just noticed there that Maxwell is a sponsor.
I see on the page opposite there's the Diodora boots. I remember Roy Keane was sponsored by Diodora as well when he was in his pomp, and I remember going down and playing. We were playing Longford Town. We were playing against Cove Ramblers, which was Roy Keane's old club, and I think his older brother. I can't remember his name. Was it John or Morris, maybe, or something like that? And he was wearing Theodore boots as well. I could imagine Roy had sent over a few pairs to the brother for the season.
They look not bad. The Theodore boots there on John Barnes.
Oh, they're lovely, yeah. It was around that time, actually, the other boots, because I remember there was like, Umbro, Adidas, Puma were kind of your usuals. But then in the 90s, again, maybe it was after this World Cup 90, that things like Diodora, and I remember Lotto coming in.
Yeah.
And I remember Ruud Gullit and I think Van Basten used to wear Lotto boots. And I remember I got a pair of Lotto boots, and I still remember them. They were by far the nicest boots that I've ever had. And I used to take such care of them. After every game, again, playing Gaelic football, I'd bring them home and clean them. And then I'd sort of, I know in this is a difference that I found later, but I used to put Vaseline on them to keep the leather soft. Whereas when I moved to Scotland in 95, I realised what I did was to clean the boots and put dubbin on them. It's a totally different form of care for their boots. And it was totally new to me because in Gaelic football, the sort of traditions isn't clean your boots like in soccer. So all this really, really new to the time I moved to Scotland and I started playing for the university in Aberdeen. And seeing all these fellas coming in with these absolutely immaculate boots and the smell of Dublin going through the changing room. But yeah, that's the Diodoras. Yeah, very, very nice boot.
Vaseline's a new one on me, but I can appreciate that because I always remember, especially if you had Adidas boots or something with white, and if you went to it with the dubbin, you'd start off, you'd try not to get any of the dubbin on the white bit. But, after a couple of weeks, you would just go over the whole thing with a dubbin and then, you'd have grey instead of white stripes on it. So the Vaseline, I guess, would cater for that. Maybe not clean it as much, but...
Yeah, it would. Like, the thing is, I think part of the reason it was because the Gaelic football pitches, when we were younger, the grass was much longer. And so it was actually exceptionally wet at times. So you wouldn't necessarily get like the football pitch surface outside of like the really high end games. The surface wouldn't be that perfect. Wouldn't be as perfect as a soccer pitch. So actually, the Gaelic football boots, a lot of fellas would wear rugby boots sometimes playing Gaelic football because it was just more suited, So I think that's partly the reason. But then Dublin, people just didn't use Dublin. That was no one used it when I was growing up. It was a totally new substance to me in relation to football boots when I saw it, which is gas, such a cultural difference, I'd say maybe fellas Dublin, who might have been on trial in England or, some fellas who might have been over in the UK on trial might come back with these sort of habits. But there was no one in my hometown that would have been back on any trial from an English league. So it was just, you just did what you thought was the best thing to do. So Vaseline is probably a very strange thing to do.
I must say, if you walked into changing rooms with a Vaseline, a jar of Vaseline, unless Jim Leighton's in there who used to put it above his eyes to stop the sweat coming down.
If you have a look at the prices there, they're no cheap. The Zenga boots are $79.99. CRD 90 Pro are $89.99.
Jesus,
that's his 1989. So
I mean that's about the last time I bought a pair of coppers. That's roughly what they might have been about, maybe a little bit more expensive, and that's not taking into account inflation and everything else. I mean that is a lot of money.
Yeah, well, the facing page they're saying ask your parents' permission before phoning this number, and then that page there it's £80 for a pair of football boots.
It's crazy. I mean, the names of the football boots are brilliant. Zenga, Europa, Van Basten. I don't know what Scatto is. Maybe that Italian player at the time, and then Barnes Stormer.
Yeah.
I looked online and you can buy a 1992 pair of Van Basten Theodora boots as new for £109.99. Although there is a warning that says, due to the age of these boots, we cannot recommend use. We advise they be kept as collector's pieces. Next, we go over the page then. Inside story. So secret playoff plans. And this is about changes being made to the English League playoffs. Trevor Phillips, League's commercial director, proposed that all 3 playoffs be played over one weekend at Wembley. Previously, there'd been 2-legged ties with a neutral venue third game if they ended in a tie. And it was the next season they brought that in, and that's the playoff format that we know now, with them playing all three games on that sort of bank holiday weekend at Wembley.
I think it's one of the things that England have definitely done really well is the playoffs. It's just added so much excitement and interest to the game. So take my hat off to them.
And there's a wee bit there. It says Williamson's warning. This is Bobby Williamson of Rotherham United telling the third division defences, "I'm playing badly at the moment, but just you wait until I get better." Adrian, Andy and I are both Clydebank supporters, and Bobby Williamson was one of the first strikers that we would have seen playing with Clydebank. It was Bobby Williamson and Tommy Coyne.
Tommy Coyne
partnership for Clydebank when Andy and I first started going to see.
Tommy Coyne was he played for Ireland in the World Cup '94. Yeah. I remember in the Italian game, or maybe it was the Mexican game, I can't remember. Chatton had them, the front striker was always chasing down the front two, like not dissimilar to the way which Klopp would organise his front three now. Only Jack Charlton had just one or maybe two. And I remember Tommy Coyne, he played an absolutely incredible game for Ireland. I think it was against Mexico, and he ran so hard that he lost, I think, about half a kilo weight, and he had to be sort of hooked up intravenously to a hydrator straight after the game. He'd kind of just give much to it. Yeah, he was a brilliant player for Ireland, Tommy Coyne. Yeah, jeez. Where's he these days? I wonder.
I'm not sure. I know his son's a player. His son plays for Linlithgow. His son's a striker. So okay. I've seen him at the odd Linlithgow game. So Linlithgow are a sort of non-league team, but his son's a pretty good, decent striker for that level. So I have seen him at the odd game when his son's been playing, but I couldn't tell you if he's still involved in football.
Yeah.
So, Andy, do you know?
I don't. I was just going to tell you my Bobby Williamson story, which you've heard 100 times. But a Clydebank game at the warm-up, Bobby and Tommy Coyne were hitting the ball into an empty net, so I jumped onto the field just as one of them hit it, and I saved it. And the language, they absolutely tore into me, tell me to get off and everything. I was a wee boy, and I was like, I just wanted to save it. So I didn't. I still loved them.
Go over the page again, unless there's something that anybody spotted. On the left-hand side here, we've got when match day comes, and this is a wee fanzine focus. So it's we focus on a Hibs fanzine and a Hearts fanzine. So no idle talk, the Hearts fanzine. Would you have got fanzines at any point, Adrian?
No. I mean, like the only real sort of clubs that might have produced fanzines would have been in Dublin, and they would have been, you might have got a fanzine maybe for St. Pat's or Shelburne or maybe Bohemians or something like that. But down the closest club to me, there was two clubs, and they were usually always in the first division with the second, which is the lower division, Athlone Town and Longford Town. Sligo Rovers a little further on, but I never went to a game there. And then there was Galway United and Limerick City as well. But I don't think any of those would have been producing fanzines. You see, the thing about soccer in parts of Ireland, the population isn't that big, but there's 3 other competing games. So Gaelic football takes a huge amount of not just players, but also supporters towards it. Same with hurling, and same with, I suppose to a smaller degree, rugby. So soccer would have been up until the late 80s and 90s definitely the third, maybe even the fourth most popular game in Ireland in terms of players and supporters, numbers of supporters. So there just wouldn't have been a sort of a culture or a sort of a kind of an organized, large enough organization of people to produce something like a fanzine at that time. So that kind of stuff, no, it didn't really happen. The only thing you get of that kind of stuff would be sort of match programs at games, and they could be very simple things up until you get into the actual upper division, the Premier Division. They'd be very, very simple things, but then they'd be a little bit more complicated after that, and they'd look more like, say, a program you might get in the UK or in Scotland before a game, but also there was the government. There wouldn't have been a huge amount of money put into the FAI local, the Irish League, the FAI League at that time either, and even still, a lot of the grounds are very, very substandard, and some of the facilities are very substandard. It's just, there just wouldn't be as much money or the sort of crowds, even that you get, like, even in a first division team in Scotland, if you got you could have 10, 12, 13, 14,000 people at a game, a big game. You wouldn't get the colour of that. You might get that in the FAI Cup final, So it's just a total difference in terms of scale in that regard. So sadly, no, because it's lovely. These are great, these fanzines.
So so no idle talk. The Hearts fanzine, and there's a Hibs Monthly fanzine. I noticed that the editor of Hibs Monthly was Colin Leslie. Colin Leslie went on to be the sports editor for the Scotsman, and he's written a couple of books. He wrote a book on Eric Shadler, the Hibs and Dundee player, and he's written a biography of Jim Holton, I think, the Manchester United player. Andy, any thoughts on those two fanzines?
Well, firstly, that they've got them round the wrong way, haven't they?
Yeah, that's what was kind of sort of covers. Confusing slightly.
Which when it comes to Hearts and Hibs, you don't want to mix up these things when it comes to rivals like this. So the Colin Leslie, is he the Jim Holton Twitter account? Does he
yeah.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
that says Colin Leslie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the facing page there is interesting. It's an advert for a film, but I think this is the first time looking at any of these football magazines that we've seen an advert for a film, which I thought was interesting. Is maybe, I don't know, they're looking at attracting a different demographic, or they realise that their demographics kind of changed. But this is the first time I've seen a movie advert.
Certainly from my experience, I mean, I can think of ones off the top of my head. Terminator 2, I think there was Star Trek the motion picture, so that was definitely a lot earlier than this. So it's maybe we've just not been picking ones, but I think because there is another one in this as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So I think maybe you're right. Maybe that they're just looking a bit more at this area for advertising, but there certainly have been ones before, but not to this number.
So this is an advert for Millennium. Millennium, a 1989 science fiction film directed by Michael Anderson and starring Chris Christopherson, Cheryl Ladd, and Daniel J. Travanti, who you remember, Hill Street Blues.
Yeah. Frank Furillo.
Wow. It scores 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. A quote from somebody on Rotten Tomatoes says, Millennium plays out much like someone trying to drunkenly explain the plot of a Doctor Who episode they haven't seen in several years.
Oh, that's amazing.
Stuff.
Wow, shoot! They must have been selling a lot of copies of this Match to justify, a big production company putting an advert into the middle of it.
Yeah.
Jesus. Anyway,
interesting. Although it is only black, is a black and white advert, so I don't know if it particularly sells the fiction element of it. I don't know if you get.
No.
All right, so we go over the page. So this is a sort of kids bit, DJ Bear Match Club. So this is a kind of thing for kids, I think. In the middle there, there's Paul Trevelyan drawings of George Best, and there's a little picture there of DJ Bear and roustabout editor Mick Robertson, who people of a certain age will remember Mick Robertson from presenting Magpie.
Yeah.
The kids TV series on ITV. Any thoughts on these two pages?
The Trevelyan drawings are they're things that just are etched into your youth, aren't they? They're just so amazing. They're beautiful beautiful drawings at best as well. Like, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, we're big fans of Paul on here, and we chat about him quite a bit. So yeah, definitely big fans. The Panda's parable at the bottom there, I don't know if you read that. So the Panda with John Motson, is it? It says, when I was in Poland, John Motson asked me what I'd do if a wild bear was to suddenly spring out. I would put on my running shoes, says the Panda. John Motson says, you couldn't outrun a bear, DJ. And the bear says, I wouldn't have to, I'd only have to outrun you. Now this reminds me of the Billy Connolly Serengeti joke. You remember that one? It's the photographers in the Serengeti, and he's putting on his Nike shoes, and it's the exact same joke. Although I think Billy told it better than either Panda Parable or myself.
All right, so we move on then from the DJ Bear pages. So we get on to the match facts. So these are the comprehensive results pull out that we've got. So we can have a wee look at some of the results. So it starts off with the UEFA Under-21 Championships. England have beat Poland 3-1. Brightwell and Steve Bull scoring twice. Scotland Under-21s lost 3-1 to France. I presume is that Marcel Desailly that they've got there that scored the first goal? Yeah,
and also they misspelt, but it's him and Ian Wilson scoring for Scotland.
Wow.
So and then there's some of those World Cup results as well. So they named the teams and they describe the goals as well. And so how they do this here, and there's match ratings as well, and player ratings when we go on to the Premier League. Any results anybody's seen there? Anything interesting that's popped out?
Yeah. Well, I used to follow Man United when I was a young fella,
right.
Which was a bad time to be a United fan during the 80s, particularly when all of your other friends were Liverpool fans. Just getting absolutely pilloried all the time. But I remember I was a huge fan of Brian McClare. I thought he was a really, really fantastic footballer, even though it was a sort of slightly unpopular it was like, who? But I thought he was a tremendous footballer at the time. And it's funny, actually, there was an interview recently, I saw Alex Ferguson being interviewed by, I think it was Gary Neville. And one of the questions was, who are the three most underrated footballers that you worked with? And Ferguson immediately said McClare was one of them. He obviously rated him very highly as a player because he had him for a good decade, he must have at least had him for a decade. He was a kind of. I actually had a Man United jersey with McClare on the back of it, and I would not say there were too many young lads in Ireland with a McClare jersey on the back. But anyway, they drew 0-0 at Sheffield Wednesday, I see, and no one got bored. Well, I mean, Robson got 8 points, but the rest of them seemed to have a bit of a nightmare.
So I noticed Mark McGee scored a late winner for Newcastle, 1 Bradford 0. Mark McGee scored the winner in injury time. But it's interesting to note, match referee Philip Wright had played 1 minute 15 seconds of injury time when McGee ran 50 yards, beat 4 men and slotted the ball in. But number one, that doesn't really sound like the Mark McGee that I remember watching. And it's interesting to note that they're pointing out that the referee had played just over a minute of added on time.
It's funny you say that. So looking at the Scotland's qualification, so this was the year that Scotland beat Cyprus 3-2 with that late 95th and that 95 and a half minute. And and there was riots afterwards from the fans and stuff because of it. And nowadays, it was mentioned that at that time, 5.5 minutes was unheard of. But nowadays, it wouldn't be that much of a problem if a team played well for one half of the team anyway. No doubt. But it's just different days again. And as you say, them mentioning the fact that there was 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Yeah. All right. So if we sort of zoom on to the end of the match facts, just a couple of wee things I was going to pick out of there. So I mean, the season's only a few months old at this point, but they pick out wee things like lowest attendance, most goals in a game, fastest goals. Division 3, Rayner of Swansea, 45 seconds. Division 4, Brockie of Doncaster, 10 minutes. Fastest goal in that division. And most goals in a game. Division 2, there's 2 matches that have had 3 goals for most goals in a game. So it is only October, so there's only been a couple of months, but still
pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, just in Division 4, they've played 10 games each as well, pretty much. That's incredible. That is 10 minutes.
Yeah. And if you notice, Saturday star men, and so it gives you in Division 1 who the best players are, what their match rating was. If you notice, Aston Villa, Mountfield 6, and Luton Priest 6. That was Aston Villa Luton game, and so those were both the 2 star men, and they'd only scored 6. Everybody else has got a 4 or a 5. You think 6 is a basic? You basically just turned up and you'll get a 6. But yeah,
Perry Groves for Arsenal got a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Perry Groves? He was like this kind of cult figure of Arsenal fans now. And Sheringham was playing for Millwall there. Wow.
Yeah.
Trevor Francis, QPR, that would have been.
Would have been, yeah. Yeah, Rodney Wallace, Paul Gascoigne, Tottenham, 9. Yeah. Anything else anybody's picked out from any of that? These stats. I mean, in these days, this is where you got your juicy information on teams and players and all that kind of stuff. Because obviously you would be poring over that for hours when you bought that magazine.
Yeah, it's funny actually the way, like, and I still do this. Like my part of my interaction, like a very large part of my interaction with football is tabular. You know, it's by looking at the tables and pouring through these figures and numbers and all this kind of stuff. And I find it really, like, I do it every weekend at least after all of the games or after all of the weekend games are over. And I see, you know, where the shifts have been, that kind of stuff. And it's such a strange habit to do because it's such a it's like a statistician's. It's like these magazines were sort of developing a generation of statisticians to kind of try and make sense of the chaos that happened the week before. So it's kind of fascinating the fact that that this form holds such drama and it holds the attention of young people still. I don't know. Do people who are like 8 or 9 still look at tables who are into football? Do they still look at tables with the kind of intensity that we would have looked at them when we were younger? I don't know. Do they?
I guess it would be live tables that they look at, sort of things like that. But the thing you talked about tables there, and the thing I've noticed, and I've only noticed it relatively recently, is they've started putting what the point is first in the table, and it's like no, the points go at the end. It's played. 1 drawn, lost, 4 against, and you have a bonus as if you split it up home and away, you know. And it's I don't get why they think that they need to change that. It's a tried and tested method and it works, so just leave it alone.
On the opposite page there, Battle of the Giants. So this is about the Littlewoods Cup. I don't know if, Andy, did you bother to look up these matches to see if match predictions came true?
I know that normally it would be my thing, but I didn't on this one.
So it's just a picture there of Michael Thomas saying we'll show them it's no fluke. This is Arsenal. He's hoping to retain the Littlewoods Cup. But nice Arsenal kit.
Yeah.
Nice Arsenal kit, yeah.
Yeah, the Gunners. The Gunners insignia is really nice in that one. That was a lovely kit, yeah.
All right, Andy.
Okay, Adrian, we're going to jump out of the magazine for a little bit here, and we're going to do a focus on. Now, I know focus on was a shoot thing, but it's basically going to hit you with a lot of questions, and if you just give us your answers. So we'll start off. Full name.
As in, my full name is Adrian Duncan.
Okay. What's your birthplace?
I was born in County Galway, which is the west coast of Ireland.
Right. What was your first car?
Jesus. Oh, I think a Fiat 126 or something.
Okay. You remember the colour?
I think it was yeah. I haven't owned one since.
Okay. Who's your favourite player of all time?
Oh, of all time. Yeah, funny because there's I think Zinedine Zidane is actually my favorite of all time, even though I don't think he's actually put into the absolute Pele Maradona league. But yeah, he'd be my favorite player of all time. I thought he's just amazing. Yeah.
Okay, who's your favorite team?
Outside of national teams, or
Yeah.
Then I follow Man United. I've followed them since I was 5. Yeah,
okay.
I'd say that.
What's the most memorable match?
Yeah, I would say, oh God, that is a tough one. Yeah, I'd say the time we drew 1-1 with Germany in the Cup in 2000 when Robbie Keane scored in the last minute against Germany. It's a flick on from Niall Quinn, and Oliver Kahn had been unbeaten and remained unbeaten until the final, until Ronaldo put 2 past him, and Robbie Keane snuck 1 past him in, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 minutes. I nearly had a heart attack. So yeah,
okay.
That was amazing. Yeah,
nice one. What's been your biggest thrill? It can be in anything, so it doesn't have to be football.
Biggest thrill. Jesus, that's a tough question. Do you know, it was actually very nice. Last year I won a book prize for my first novel, and it was the John McGahern Book Prize. It's through the University of Liverpool, and because I'm pretty new to the world in terms of my first book came out in 2019, and that was my debut novel, and it was a real thrill for it to be nice. Yeah, so that was very nice actually. Yeah, okay. That was, and quite recent as well.
Yeah. Okay, what's the best country you've visited?
The best country?
Yep.
Do you know, I made it to Bilbao up in the northwest, the Basque region up in Spain 2 years ago. I thought it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful place. Such a strange language as well. Not that I understood what was being said in either Spanish or Basque.
Yeah.
But that was amazing. And what was really amazing was that Spain were playing in the World Cup during that day. And I thought to myself, God, what they'll do. And they all had their Atletico Bilbao jerseys on. And they didn't cheer when Spain won. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So yeah, fascinating place. Spain and not Spain, you know.
Okay, what's your favourite food?
Well, I may as well stay in Bilbao. Those little pinchos, the little tapas, little fish tapas and little kind of vegetarian tapas with a nice little glass of red wine.
Nice, okay.
That's really good over there. Yeah.
Miscellaneous likes, so give me 2 things that you like doing.
Do you know, actually, I've started doing it again recently. Just going out to a nearby park here and doing keepy-uppies for about 40 minutes, hitting the ball again into a goal for about 45 minutes. I love doing it. Haven't played football in ages, but I love doing that. It's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And then the other thing I like doing, I really like writing. I like my job as a writer.
Okay, just as well, eh? Okay, miscellaneous dislikes. So give me 2 things that drive you up the wall.
Trying buying a flight on a Ryanair website. Just tension. Jesus. Oh God. That I really don't like doing. But it has to be done. And then the other thing I don't really like doing, I'd say, Jesus, maybe I'm overthinking this. Doing my tax. It's just horrible, you know.
Tax, okay. Favorite TV show of all time?
Of all time? Oh wow, that's a good one. Do you know? I have to say, just for over the years, all of the Alan Partridge stuff, but the couple he did, the little 6-minute ones or 12-minute ones during the early 2000s, mid-mornings, they're done. Norfolk, North Norfolk Digital offices. That's when the Psychic Simon guy came in. And I think it was the first time the two Gibbons brothers started writing for Alan with Steve Coogan. But those two first series of Mid-Morning Matters are absolutely unbelievably good. I love them. They're exceptional. Yeah. So that'd be my favorite show.
Although I still contend that the last series of this time with the Irish Alan Partridge impersonator is the funniest thing that's been on television in years.
The weirdest thing, the weirdest thing about that was that when I was looking at, because Steve Coogan's got a lot of Irish family, he's got a very strong Irish, and he does a brilliant Irish accent as well. But what was really weird about that was that the Irish guy in it was at once a sort of massive, sort of cartoonish, while at the same time I could imagine immediately three different fellas have met exactly like that without any sort of exaggeration. It was a weird, very weird thing to look at because I felt both things at once, but it was and the songs that he sang, like "Come Out You Black and Tan," and then when "Sweet 16" sung by an old lad like that, it's just so creepy. And the men behind the wire, oh my god, a bit more rebel songs if you tried. It was very, very fun.
Yeah, honestly, I think I had to rewind it because I honestly laughed for about 3 minutes solid, and I had to put it back and watch it again. Still, honestly, it was the first thing in years that I was sort of excited to tell people about. Like, did you see that? And then I would explain to them how it went, kind of thing. It's the first time I'd done that in a long time.
Oh my god! And I love the bit halfway through when he's singing. He's starting to sing, I think, "The Men Behind the Wire." He shouts over at Simon like he's in a sort of pub. "Come on, Simon!" Simon doesn't have a clue what's going on. He's probably never seen this sort of pub singing in his life. Oh man, that was exceptionally funny. Yeah, geez, that was brilliant. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's funny on Twitter the next day. Normally, like an awful lot of times in Ireland, people get kind of offended if people do Irish, do Irish jokes. No one, as that I could see anyway, on who's Irish on Twitter, they're all just going, "That is absolutely amazing." Everyone loved it. There was no one. Everyone was just like, "That is absolutely amazing." I think a lot of people like me could recognize something very strange in it as well. It was a kind of genius, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we've got your favourite TV show then, I think, sorted out. That's a shoe-in. Favourite singers, so you can give me 2 singers or bands or groups.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really liked King Creosote, a Scottish lad. He is brilliant. I saw him a few times in Ireland. Great voice. I saw him loads of times. Yeah, he was really good. But there's so many brilliant Scottish bands. Mogwai as well was another band that I really, really liked. When I was even outside of when I was living in Scotland, and I really loved the film that Douglas Gordon did with Mogwai, and it was of Zidane over the 90 minutes with just cameras pointed at him. That was a really, really nice piece of work. Arab Strap, I really like them. I name it all Scottish bands here. I know. Teenage Fan Club, another one, absolutely love them. Someone posted Grand Prix recently on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh Jesus, that was such a good track." But I'd say my favorite singer was probably David Bowie, to be honest. But oh man, all those Scottish bands, they all came out of like a small pocket of Fife. A lot of them came out of it.
Yeah,
it's just like astonishing, How did this happen?
Okay. Favourite actors, so you can give me 2 favourite actors.
Favourite actors.
If one of them isn't Steve Coogan, then I'm going to have words.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, it's so hard to disentangle him from Partridge, Your man Joaquin Phoenix is good crack. I like watching him.
Yep.
As a modern actor. And then, just even for The Big Lebowski alone, Jeff Bridges, I just absolutely love him. And then Tilda Swinton, this actress, I think she's brilliant as well.
Right, okay. Who's your best friend?
That's probably when see back in Ballymahan. Then there's Fergal, who's a very, very good friend as well. I work with him a lot as well. And then there's Michael Farrell. They'll be the 3 main. Paulie Kern as well. Jesus. Yeah, they'd be the main three. Holy Miles Tynan as well.
I'm sorry.
That bunch, Miles, and
I'm sorry, you can
it's
only
hard
have
to
one.
pick one.
I can only have one. No, listen, that'll do. That's fine. That'll do. Who's your biggest influence? So this could be.
How about we put all four of them into a snug and say they're one person? Okay.
Fair enough. Who's been your biggest influence? This could be work or personal.
Yeah. My mum probably. Just in terms of work ethic and things like that, and just like the idea that you have to work if you want to get somewhere. That would have come from her very, very strongly, just from a very young age. Idea that you're not like, that if you do work hard, things might go well for you, but you have to work hard. And that was the kind of main key that I got away, that I learned from her. That was a very important thing as well. My friend always says you work too hard, but I just see it as being that's just what you do. You have to work hard if you want to get on and do things yourself. Okay. So yeah, my mum.
Nice. Okay, final question: which person in the world would you most like to meet?
These are really difficult questions. I've never considered these things before. That I'd love, the person I'd love to meet most in the world. Jesus.
So this could be someone alive or dead. So
right. Okay. Yeah, but then, there was a writer I came across last year. She's pretty obscure. She's a Belgian writer, and she wrote this amazing book back in the early 50s called Memoirs of Hadrian, and it's about the Emperor Hadrian. She wrote a lot of books afterwards in her later years. She wrote in French, but they're translated into English. I remember at the time just thinking, I would love to meet her. And her name is Marguerite Yourcenar. I'd never heard of her until last year, so I don't expect anyone else to have heard of her. But her book, Memoirs of Hadrian, is brilliant. It's a novel, but it's absolutely. I was blown away by it. So yeah, I think I'd like her. She seemed pretty cool.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. I'll hand you back over to Tom.
All right, so we'll stay with you for a minute, Adrian. So this is your book, Midfield Dynamo, a book of short stories. And I think this is, you get asked about all the time. I think that you've laid them out in a football formation, and there's this wee tactical drawing you've got there at the front. So mixing football and literature, did anybody tell you don't do it?
It's funny actually, because the idea came to me. So I'd written this short story years ago called Midfield Dynamo, and it was basically more or less based, my dad, who he himself played soccer when he was younger. He played football when he was younger, and he played midfield. And by all accounts, he was a pretty good midfielder. He played for Longford Town briefly as well. And so that was the first story I wrote. That was back in 2013 or so, and there's a little bit of football in that. And then a couple of years later, I was here in Berlin, and I was reading some work by Thomas Bernhard, who's a pretty well-known Austrian writer, he was born in the Netherlands, but he writes a lot of his books. Classical music he was a classically trained pianist, and classical music goes through his books, and he goes on extended rants about classical music through his books, and you can tell in the rants that he's having great fun actually ranting on about classical music. So when I was reading one of his books, I think it was Wittgenstein's Nephew or something like that, and I was reading it away one day, and I was like, geez, he's having an awful lot of crack with this. I was like, I wonder what do I know about, to the same degree that he knows about classical music, and I wonder, could I write something about in that vein? So I was like, well, I know an awful lot about football because I've been looking at it since I've been 5 and trying to play it since I've been 5. So I said to myself, why don't I try and write about football? So literally the afternoon, I sat down and I moved from one cafe to another, and over 3 or so hours, I'd written a short story called Prosinecki. And I was like, I remember when I'd written it, came out very easily, and I was like, I think this is actually good. And then I gave it to my girlfriend, Neve, and she's into football. She's not that into football. She read it a few weeks later, and she said, yeah, this definitely has something going on. I sent it to a couple of Irish literary journals. One of them was called the Dublin Review, who had published me before, a really nice literary journal. And they responded saying, well, this is about football. I mean, we're not going to publish this, you know. And I was like, okay. And then I sent it to another literary journal who published me before as well. And I thought I had a good relationship with them. And they didn't even respond. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then Sally Rooney, in the interim, Sally Rooney had written this short story. You know, Sally Rooney of Normal People and all that. She had written a short story based loosely on Robbie Keane's goal against Italy in the 2016 European Championships. And it's a really, really nice short story that she wrote, a really, really good short story. And I clocked it and I was like, Sally Rooney likes football. And then a few months, then about 2018 or so, Sally Rooney was named as the editor of another Irish literary journal called The Stinging Fly. And I said to myself, I'm going to send this into Sally Rooney because she'll actually like this. And within about within a month or two of sending it in, she came back and she said, I love this story. We definitely want to publish it. And then she and I worked on it for about maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, she actually is really knowledgeable about football. I mean, a lengthy conversation about how you should spell fullback. Should there be 2 words? Should it be 1 word? All this kind of stuff. And she was really into all of this details. And then she talked about, you know, the role of the central midfielder and how their kind of position in the field. Like she was kind of saying to her, there's passages in the text that are written in the way a midfielder would only write them. Like if you were a left back, you wouldn't see the pitch and the way, you'd see it differently to a midfielder. When you're a midfielder, you don't see a lot of the pitch most of the time. Whereas if you're a right back, you see most of the pitch all the time. And we talked about these details and she was totally game and totally interested. And the conversation went over and back really well. So that's how then that story got published. And then I realized then that football actually isn't so strange a thing and that it is actually welcome by certain people in literature. And then if you nose around a little bit, you can see a few more instances of football appearing in literature. And I think it's going to appear more often actually in the coming years because it is a huge cultural phenomenon. Like there's so many billions of people look at football. Mm-hmm. The idea that it doesn't appear in literature more often, to me, just doesn't make any sense. It's a blind spot. And so that's why I decided, I'm just going to pursue this in footballing terms, this book in footballing terms, even though all the stories aren't about football.
Yeah.
That didn't matter to me. I was like, I'm going to use the structure of a football team for this collection. Partly because it helped me. So when I was putting the collection together, so there's 12 stories, so that's 11 team players and a coach. And I couldn't understand what order to put the stories in when I looked at them in a vertical list. So, you know, when you're doing a mixtape, there's always as many good reasons for putting one song before or after an next one. You could put there's always these quandaries, these problems. And that's the same problem I had with the collection of short stories. I didn't know which one to put before or after the next. So then what I did was, it just came to me one night. I woke up in the following morning and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to set them out as a football team. So then I was thinking about the stories in terms of the personality. So I was like, okay, well, let's say, for instance, design number 108, which is the first story. I was like, that's a goalkeeper. That would not be any good anywhere else on the pitch. And then I was like, half bird, half bear, which is another short story. I put that in between because I knew, well, there's no point putting that. It would be good. And just the same, we wouldn't put it up front. Same with trusses. I was like, you wouldn't play trusses up front, et cetera, et cetera. So then all of a sudden, the team came together. I was like, that's a good team. I can trust this team. And then I deconstructed the 11 and just put, and then I just sort of, obviously they have to go into a book one after, but the order is goalkeeper, back four, midfield, up front. So that's how I use this everyday structure of a footballing 11 to help me understand how to organize the book.
The story Prosinecki, there's a couple of great wee bits in it. I mean, I noted down just a wee line when the goalkeeper's getting carried off the pitch. It says, prone in the stretcher, he lifts his arm to the crowd, who cheer as if he was a miner being lifted from a blast. That's great. And there's also there's a wee bit you put, so the midfielder in that story sort of idolised Robert Prosinecki, and there's a good wee bit you put about how he could see the pass that had to be played and not the stylish pass, or not the pass you might want to play, but what benefits the team. I thought that was a nice observation.
Yeah, that's something that fascinates me about passing. That some passes on a football pitch are taken because the people will enjoy them, or because they're aesthetically beautiful, or because they'll arc beautifully across the pitch, but they might not necessarily be the best pass at that moment. And I have a controversial theory about this that a lot of my friends disagree with, and I'm sure you too. But I think one of the main reasons why Man United were so successful around the time when, let's say, Liverpool weren't as successful, I think part of the reason is that Man United's midfield too, even though Scholes was well able to hit that 40-yard diagonal ball, but that the habit for the two midfielders was they were like boxers who jabbed. They were like boxers who jabbed past those lines between the midfield and the back four, constantly hitting the ball into feet, into Ruud van Nistelrooy or later Wayne Rooney or whoever, and they were getting on the turn. If you do that over 90 minutes, you're going to wear a team down. And if that's the pass that you always go for, that kind of psychotic jab all the time, or most often, you're going to wear a team down. Whereas if you decide more often to spray this ball in a beautiful kind of arc where the defending team can effectively recollect, you're losing an advantage. And over the course of a game and over the course of a whole season, that produces differences in points. So my view is that because United had a more psychotic and less they were less concerned about the aesthetics of it in midfield, I think that's why they were more successful as a team in terms of winning leagues compared to like Liverpool or that kind of team. Some people disagree with me, but I think it's a very good theory.
So Andy, can we then have a wee look at that Yugoslavian team that we were talking about earlier on?
Wow.
Can you see that, Adrian?
So this is also from Match Magazine, but it's from June, so it's probably just before the World Cup. But yeah, it's in there. It says the Yugoslavia squad is packed with talent and players like Dragan Stojkovic, Robert Prozinecki, and veteran Safet Susic. They would be formidable members of any international side. So yeah, some players in there.
Yeah, and like the thing was, I don't think Prozinecki is in that for itself actually, but after once the Balkan War started, and particularly the Red Star Belgrade team broke up, all of those players went off to other European teams, France and Italy and Spain. And it must have been so strange to have come from a team that was so successful at club level to all of a sudden in each other, just gone completely. The team, the club, the whole country obliterated. It must have been an extremely strange experience. But the brand of football that they played was just. I remember, when I was that age, you'd hear about it in European football nights. Like I vaguely remember the Red Star team beating Rangers, and then they beat Bayern Munich. And I just remember getting glimpses because there was no YouTube, you were just getting glimpses on TV, like on the news, glimpses of these kind of extreme exotic sounding footballers playing this kind of really not a type of football where the kind of midfield virtuoso was central to it, they were just such a kind of a mythical bunch, the Red Star Belgrade, and by extension the Yugoslavian team. I think Prozinecki ended up playing with Croatia after the break of Yugoslavia, and he had a very good World Cup in '98, I think it was.
Yeah, and just doing a wee bit of reading about him. Apparently, he smoked all the way through his playing career.
Yeah. I think he was born in actually Germany, he was born to I think it was a military camp. Like I think his father or his mother were in the army or something. I think he's fluent in German as well. And I think when he was playing, he went for trials to Red Star Belgrade or something like that, and they were like, "Yeah, no, you're not good enough." And I think the father kind of stepped in and said, you're making an awful mistake not taking this fella on. And they ended up reversing their decision or something, much to their, I'm sure, joy, because he turned out to be a really important player for that team. And there was Vicevic, who played up front, who went on and played in Italy, and he had an absolutely brilliant career as well. The funny thing about Eki was that he ended up going over to Barcelona, then he got injured, and then I think he went to Real Sociedad, and then he went to Madrid. So he's like one of those few players that have actually gone from Barcelona or Madrid. But I think his injuries were just constantly coming to him. He never really imposed himself in Spain. But then he popped up again in I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s in Portsmouth. I don't know, do you remember that, when he played briefly in either the Championship or the Premier League? And he was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I think it was Harry Redknapp he brought. I can't remember. But he was so good. And he was at the end of his career now.
Yeah.
And he was stupendously good. But I ended up going down last year, just before the lockdown and before all the COVID stuff. I was working on a film project, and I wanted to go and record the shouts at football games. And I wanted to it's a film that sort of, and I wanted to particularly have Portsmouth's singing. So I ended up going to Lincoln City versus Portsmouth game up in Lincoln, and then traveling all the way down to England all the way down to Portsmouth the following Saturday to record just audio, just singing at the Portsmouth Sunderland game in Fratton Park. And it was really interesting because Fratton Park is one of those old stadiums from the early 1900s. They were designed by the Archibald Leach fella, the guy who did the Rangers in Villa Park and the McLeod end in Hearts. And that Fratton Park is absolutely beautiful old stadium, but the sound in it is quite different to the kind of the newer stadia. You know, those older stadiums, they noise totally differently to the newer ones. You know, and there's something, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's definitely a strange, different experience. I'd love to go to Goodison as well and sit in the old stand there and just see what the sound in there, because there's definitely something different on. You know, like I mentioned earlier on, the difference between the Aviva Stadium and the old Lansdowne Road. I think it's something like that as well. Those old structures are just fascinating, you know.
Yeah, well, again, it's the same here, you know, with the Hampden Roar. You know, very rare you get that here, you know, at Scotland games nowadays. But I think it was just sort of standard back when it was old terracing. Yeah,
I used to go to a lot of I lived in Edinburgh for a couple of years, and I used to go to the Hearts games because I lived in Shandon, and I used to go. It was when who was the Russian dude had taken over, and Mike, was it Burley? What's his name? The Burley was the manager.
Yeah, George Burley.
George Burley. Is it Burley or Burnley? Burley.
Burley.
Yeah. Burley. He was the manager. I remember Hearts were top of the league coming into Christmas, and the atmosphere around Shandon was absolutely electric. And going to those games on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon was just brilliant. Like, especially when Rangers came through or anything like that. Geez, the crack. Like, there was a real buzz in the air, you know, because Hearts they were being taken quite seriously because they were doing brilliantly. A really good team as well at the time. Yeah, that was brilliant crack, actually. Yeah.
So we're just going to look at a Hearts team group now when we get back into the magazine. So this is the Hearts team from 1989-90 season. I don't know if there's anything you want to pick out from there, Adrian, that you've spotted, or any haircuts.
Well, I can see some haircuts, all right. See, it's funny because part of the reason I went to college was because of the success that Aberdeen had in European football. Even though it was like you were just getting the names, when you're so young making these decisions, you're based them on such kind of arbitrary things. But I can see the lovely old stand there in Hearts. Is that still there? That stand in behind them?
I wouldn't say, to be honest.
I don't think there's any more of the old stand there now. I think it's all new stuff.
Isn't it? Okay, yeah.
So I
remember being the in Hearts in being really small, like the actual box, being really close to the sideline. And that, like, it was kind of, it always seemed to me like a pitch that was very close to being sort of below standard in size. I had a bit of a tilt on it as well. I'd say it was a tough ground to come to for away teams who weren't used to that kind of tightness. And when the noise built up as well in there in the early, was it 2002 or so, 2003, geez, you get an almighty atmosphere banging around it, you know. But I wouldn't say in the late 80s, I don't think I would have been taking a huge amount of notice of Hearts, to be perfectly honest.
Well, you've got the Irish national hero, Gary Mackay, is in there. He's scored the winner for Scotland against Bulgaria that sent Ireland through.
That sent us to 88. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he scored the most important Irish goal probably of all time. I mean, that's essentially what kind of kick-started the game in Ireland, you know, John Mackay's goal. I think whenever he goes to Ireland, and if a discerning fan spots him, he always gets a pint ball from him. Like, he's never he's never left dry. If there's any kind of meetings up, so I think he's always involved in them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great wee thing that when you get somebody like that who's a kind of hero for a team he's really no connection with, kind of thing, you know. It's great that you know fans. I'll sort of remember guys like that who've scored the goal that sent their team through, even though he wasn't actually playing for their team.
That's it. Yeah, no, you do, and like the thing is that the details of it, because now everything is so immediate. The actual details of it, or what the goal looked like, you mightn't have seen it for another year later. Like, I had this experience. This is a really funny one, actually. When I was getting that World Cup '90 poster, I remember looking at the art. They had this golden goals section, and one of the golden goals was Archie Gemmel's goal against Holland, which of course, like one of the greatest goals of all time. And I'm not saying that just because you're Scottish. But I don't know if it was his balding head or what it was that made it so brilliant, but it was brilliant. Anyway, I remember when I was looking at that in the World Cup '90 book, or the little manual, whatever you call it, the little weekly booklet, and it was like a series of illustrations sort of showing in freeze frame how he went around these Dutch defenders. And you couldn't read, you could kind of go, yeah, I kind of get that. But YouTube wasn't available, so you couldn't just type in Archie Gemmell goal and see it. You were like denied the view of it. And it wasn't until years later, I'd moved to Scotland. I was living in Aberdeen, and I think I was in third year in college, maybe second year. Whenever Trainspotting came out, you know, the film with Ewan McGregor and what have you. I remember that came out and it was just like, oh, a film. And I remember when I was watching the film, you know, the sex scene in it, where Ewan McGregor is getting on with Kelly MacDonald and the other guy is getting on with his girlfriend. And Ewan, or Rentboy, I think it's Rentboy, has swapped their sex tape out for the Scottish Great Goals tape. And the two tapes are on at the same time. It's an amazing part of the film where they're going over and back between the two couples making out or actually getting it on. And in between the flickers between the couples getting it on, you see Archie Gemmell's goal. I remember in the middle of all of this kind of fervor and lovemaking, I remember thinking to myself, that's what the Archie Gemmell goal looked like. Because I had never seen it being played in its, because it would never be on an Irish TV. And that's what it looked like. So that scene has got a very special place in my heart, simply because of it brought me these still images that I'd seen about 6 years previous in a World Cup '90 manual.
At the Scottish Football Museum at Hampden, you can walk through the goal. They've got like Dutch mannequins of the players sort of falling over kind of thing, and they've got a wee sort of dotted path that you can sort of walk round where Archie Gemmell went.
That's a brilliant idea. I love it. I don't know what goal Ireland would take for that. It might be maybe one of Ray Houghton's, maybe Ray Houghton's header against
goal against Italy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a good one. But I don't think we have any of those mazy dribble. Maybe one of Aidan McGeady's goals. Maybe we could pull them out, but they weren't maybe just quite as important as that one.
So Andy, you get anybody to pull out of that Hearts team?
Well, I'm just going to point out the assistant manager on the left-hand side, Walter Borthwick, who died sadly this year in April. So just pointing out him there. About the kit, we have discussed this before, but the kit maker is actually Buckter. It's a very unusual. It's not what you would associate the Buckter badge as being, because you would think of the Hibs kit from the 80s, the one that George Best wore where they had the Buckter across it, but it's a different logo that Buckter had then. Thorn Security as a sponsor as well. But yeah, I mean, there's Alan McLaren, there's Craig Levine in there as well. There's Dave McPherson, John Robertson, John Colquhoun. I mean, it's loads of really, really well-known Hearts players, Scottish players in general.
Tosh McKinley as well. Yeah.
Eamon Bannon, who's that famous for the get Bannon off thing. But yeah, some great names in there.
Did Tosh McKinley? He played for Celtic, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, neat kind of right back, wasn't he, or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember him. Yeah, good player. Jeez, he's young there. Look at the big head of hair now. God.
Right, so we turn the page then. So another team group. We've got a Norwich City team group here. What do you think of that? Those rows, Andy? Sort of 3 rows. A wee bit haphazard, kneeling at the front.
Yeah, we've got the front sat on a bench, apart from the last ones on either side who are crouching. One of them doesn't look too happy about it either, and probably got the tallest guy in the entire team sitting crouching in the front row as well. So Malcolm Allen, the second one from the left, it just doesn't look as though he should be standing at the back row probably. It's not the worst, there's symmetry there that they've sorted out with the goalkeepers. They've got player keeper, and certainly in the middle row there's a curve to it. See, I like to look at these things and have a look about how they've actually set up the team photos, because I think I like to see when they've put the effort in, because it is a snapshot in time that it's going to be up on people, supporters' walls, and they're going to think of that period with this team photo. So I think it's important that they made the effort. I mean, sometimes you see players who are too small behind like a goalkeeper, so all you can do is see the top of it. I mean, to be honest, it's nearly the case with Andy Townsend, that you're only quite a bit of his chin is missing.
Oh jeez, yeah, missed him there. Yeah, that's right.
But overall, I don't think it's certainly not the worst. Certainly not the worst, Tom.
Okay. So a decent strip, Isaac's strip there with the sort of stripes diagonally across sort of quarter of the shirt. That's quite a smart looking shirt. And some of the names in the team there: Brian Gunn, goalkeeper; Dale Gordon, who do we spell at Rangers? Andy Townsend, as we've mentioned; Tim Sherwood, wee spiky blonde haircut at the time. Jeremy Goss, he did spell at Hearts, didn't he?
Robert Fleck, he was a very, very good player.
Robert Fleck, yeah.
Oh, Rule Fox, he was excellent
Fox,
as well.
yeah.
Brilliant player. Yeah.
And normally they do an inset for these ones. They say not in picture, Henrik Mortensen from our house. Normally they would have in this case, judging by the rest of the magazine, they'd probably put a black and white photograph of him as an inset one. But it's strange that they've included them in the list without actually including a photograph.
Yeah, that is unusual. All right, so I think time's getting on a wee bit. So could we jump onto the letters page, the match mailbag. Shoot would sort of headline the letters, but only the star letters headlined here. The main letter here, star letter, is ban is unfair, and it's a letter from Jai Simpson of Rochdale. I'm writing to say that the ban on English clubs in Europe is now getting to be a big joke. You only have to look around the continent to see the trouble, but FIFA just turn a blind eye and ignore them. But if the English fans are involved, they kick up a big fuss and they think about doubling the ban. When Liverpool were banned from Europe, why weren't Juventus? I think they might be hiding the fact that when we get into Europe, we always succeed in bringing back a trophy, showing our dominance of world-class football today. So come on, FIFA, lift the ban today. It will be the best result in foreign soil for years. And Match's reply is, good point. England seem to be made the scapegoat for a European problem. So yes, this is sort of 4 years into the ban on English clubs at this point.
I think the response to that is a little disappointing. It's like, England. I think there's also a lot of whataboutery going on in the actual letter itself, you know, rather than focusing on, you know, why England were in this position. They're looking at, well, what about Juventus? Why didn't they get banned? And it's like, it's just a bit of whataboutery, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the picture there of Graham Souness, and there's a letter there, Mark Griffiths from Ellesmere Port, South Wirral. Who do Rangers think they are? Over a £10 million team, you would have thought they would play well or do well. Graham Souness hasn't a clue. For instance, buying Ray Wilkins, what a mistake. A few years ago, he was at his peak, but now he's past it. I'm not picking just on Ray, but some of the ridiculous prices he pays. Trevor Steven is one of them. I mean, £2 million is silly, even though he is a talented player. I think Souness needs to sort out his team before he sinks. And Match responds by saying it's early days yet.
he could have picked, well, he probably couldn't have picked two worse players to criticise as well, you know, Ray Wilkins and Trevor Steven. So, yeah, I think, who's it, Mark Griffiths? I think he's got that way wrong.
No, it was Trevor Steven went on to win 7 league titles with Rangers.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And a wee bit there about John Aldridge. Anthony Spooner of Berwick says, I wonder whether John Aldridge would be a success abroad or whether he will suffer the same fate as Ian Rush. Some ways I hope he fails, because then he could come back and play for Liverpool again, just like Rushy did. Since he left, we don't have a class forward on the subs bench, so what happens if Barnes, Beardley or Rush get injured? And the reply is, you bring on Steve Staunton and he scores a hat.
He was Staunton, pretty prolific goal scorer for a left back when he was at Liverpool. Geez, he had a great season. It's pity his managerial his period as a manager at Ireland really kind of tainted his relationship with the fans. Yeah, it was so disastrous, and he wasn't kind of didn't seem in any way apologetic about some of the results that were coming in. He really turned fans against him, who would have really admired him for his playing career. It was a bit of a shame that happened, because he was a brilliant player as well. But also soon after that, I think Aldridge went to Real Sociedad.
Yeah.
I remember actually there's a really funny moment in that World Cup, the road to the USA in '94. I think Aldridge he'd been in Sociedad for a couple of seasons. And at the end of the game, he's been interviewed by the Spanish press, and he's speaking in Spanish to the Spanish reporters, but you can tell that he's speaking in the most Scouse accent as evoke in the Spanish language. It's really funny. He did well though at Sociedad. He did well pretty much everywhere. Aldridge, yeah.
He did, yeah. We look at his record. He was a terrific goal scorer, John Aldridge. He really was. I think he came back to Tranmere Rovers. He come back to.
Yeah.
All right, move over the page then as we rattle through. So again, that's another film advert, again in black and white, another black and white poster, gleaming the cube.
It sounds like a euphemism, that, doesn't it? Gleaming the cube. I don't know what a euphemism for, but
well, it had alternative titles, also known as A Brother's Justice and Skate or Die.
Oh,
A 1989 American neo-noir film directed by Graham Clifford and starring Christian Slater as Brian Kelly, a 16-year-old skateboarder investigating the death of his adopted Vietnamese brother.
Is this like a random storyline generator that's just put something together?
And it currently holds 29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh my god!
It's better than the other one. I can't imagine.
Might have to watch that on YouTube tonight.
And at the bottom there's a wee advert for the army there at the bottom. Going in, silly not to, the professionals. It's all about basically kids peering in the window of the army recruitment. It's amazing how many people think they know all about the army without ever asking someone who's actually in it. That's why we set up army careers information offices all over the UK. Yeah, so I'm saying we've seen this kind of before, adverts for the armed forces or the police as well in these kind of magazines.
I mean, you'd imagine the audience is going to have quite a lot of people in there who they are trying to target, isn't it? You know, I imagine there would be quite a few people interested in that.
Yeah.
So we're going over the page. This is the Skull Cup preview. Hampden Hitmen. So it's Aberdeen against Rangers. It seemed as if the Skull Cup final was just a sort of Groundhog Day Aberdeen v Rangers every season. About that, you know. And they've asked a former Aberdeen player and a former Rangers player to rate the teams. Billy Stark of Celtic says third time lucky Dons, and Nicky Walker of Motherwell says fired up Rangers. And it's a picture there of Jim Bett of Aberdeen and Richard Gough of Rangers. Did you go to see Aberdeen much when you were at university there, Adrian?
I went a couple of times down to Pittodrie, yeah. The thing was that because I was playing with the university a lot, so every Wednesday and every Saturday afternoon I'd be playing either the local leagues or the university leagues, and because most of the games are on at those kind of days, I missed an awful lot of the games. But I went to a few games. I remember Russell Anderson was playing for them, and but the train in the park was down near me in, I think it was the Don Park, called the Don Park or something like that. And I used to see the team out there training sometimes in the middle of the park. It was it was pretty interesting because I'd never seen a professional football team of this kind before, and it was pretty fascinating for me to watch them going through their exercise and what have you. And I always noted, particularly if it was early in the season, how tanned they all were because they'd obviously been away on holidays for a good bit of the summer. Yeah. But they were. I remember it was a good buzz down at the Aberdeen games. I remember I went to a Rangers game, and geez, the atmosphere was pretty poised. I was taken aback by how. The kind of the vitriol between the two sets of supporters. I didn't, because I wouldn't have understood necessarily the history between the two of them, but I learned it pretty quickly, and I was like, that is pretty like there was like a real proper kind of dislike for each other. You know? And I didn't know that existed as much in Scotland. Like say, obviously Celtic and Rangers, and I knew about obviously Hibs and Hearts, but I didn't know about that undercurrent between Aberdeen and Rangers. Yeah.
Usually these ones are kind of worse where it's built up over a particular incident or something. I mean, Celtic and Rangers is just pretty much handed down, father to son. For hatred kind of thing, and Hearts Hibs obviously very local on the same sort of community kind of thing. But Aberdeen Rangers had a sort of horrible incident at the centre of it that kind of grew outwards over the years.
It just became a stick for either of them to beat each other with each time. It just we used to go to a pub actually after our football games up in the north side of the city, and Miller owned the pub actually, so we met Willie Miller twice, a nice old chap, but he would have been a huge star in Aberdeen. Like he would have been a famous man in Aberdeen even at that time in the mid-90s. I think he was retired a couple of years by then.
I think he's considered the greatest Don, isn't he, Willie Miller?
So there's wee ratings of the players there. Charlie Nicholas, a marvellous player who loves the big stage, has had some problems hitting the target this season, but someday soon some club is sure to suffer. Rangers beware, rating 9. And Paul Mason, a bit of an unknown quantity, but he has fitted in well at Pittodrie, so he can't be bad, rating 7. And spoiler alert, this was the final where Aberdeen won. Paul Mason scored both the goals. Aberdeen won 2-1 after extra time. Mark Walters scored for Rangers. Paul Mason scored 22 minutes and the winner in 103 minutes.
Just the Skull Cup, was that essentially the League Cup at the time?
Yeah, it was, so there was 2 trophies. So there was obviously the traditional League Cup, and then there was a special Skull Cup trophy as well. But,
and Skull was the drink, wasn't it? The lager. Okay, back to me now.
So there was quite a few finals between Aberdeen and Rangers over the years, and they were usually quite entertaining games. And this is one of the few ones that Aberdeen managed to win. All right, if we just jump on to the next page. So it's Match Superstore. Adrian, have you picked out anything from these adverts that you've seen?
Oh yes, I did. I saw something brilliant in here. Oh yeah, it was the Serious Collectors. Yeah, a service designed especially for the club collector. A computer list of your club's home and aways. We currently hold a stock of 46,000 different items. We hold large stocks of every league club, including many Scottish, Irish, and non-league, enclosing 30p in stamps or an international reply coupon. And I was like, my God, who Who would look for something like that? It's funny, these little adverts. Like, you kind of, when you don't buy newspapers, I feel like it's a part of my life that's disappeared. It's almost like the kind of the socials you get, where man, lonely handsome man looking for woman or whatever. Yeah, that one caught my eye. It was just so strange.
There's a wee one there under collector's fairs that says World Football Annual 89-90, 950 pages, an Italian book but with 90% statistics. Super. Send £16 by cheque and has an address in Luxembourg.
They're selling that, aren't they?
Again, like you were saying earlier on, it's just statistics. It's 90% statistics.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I don't know why. It's such a strange impulse, isn't it, in football fans? This sort of this desire to kind of look at over these tables of numbers. Because I'd say, as someone who isn't interested in football, they really must just wonder what on earth people are seeing in it. I think it's part of me thinks it's just a desire to kind of make a pattern out of all of this stuff, And a table is just the best way to put it all there at once, or at least it was the best way to do it. But it's it's something it just mystifies me, why so many fans are just drawn to that form of making sense of the story of a season,
Yeah.
Tom, was this the year that Man City had that craze about the balloon, the blow up?
Inflatables, I was just going to mention that. Yeah, there's a wee advert: equipment, football inflatables, bananas, skeletons, etc. from 99p. Yeah. Please send SAE for top 100 list.
Yeah, it's like there's no correlation between football and bananas and skeletons, is there?
Well, when I was watching that, like I was saying earlier on, I was watching on YouTube that Republic of Ireland Northern Ireland game, and you spot a few inflatables in that, bananas and skeletons.
Yeah, there was one supporter, I think he was from Cork, and I think he went to a lot of away games, and he was always the fella there with the big banana. And he went, like, you could look at World Cup footage and all the rest, and it was just there with a banana. And it wasn't like, I think he just liked having this very incongruent object in the middle of a football pitch. Like, I made the scarves and all this other football related stuff, and just a big yellow banana in the middle of it. But yeah, it was definitely part of the definitely the 80s and 90s traveling supporter thing. There was some dude in there with a banana all the time. I don't know who it was, but yeah, it's definitely, it's not just something that caught your eye. It happened a lot.
Pat Nevin mentions it in his new book. He suggests that was kind of it helped stop the football violence, because people were carrying these big stupid inflatables kind of thing, and there was more of an air of fun about it.
Yeah. It's a very good point, because I mean, you're not going to beat up someone holding an inflatable banana.
And just across from that, there's a wee thing that says there's two wee personal, and one is how to chat up girls, and there's an 0898 phone number, and the one below that is how to unlock your hidden powers, and again an 0898 phone number.
Oh my God.
Anything you spotted there, Andy?
No, you've picked out the ones that I was looking at, so especially those two have taken the numbers.
Quite an odd collection of different things there.
Yeah.
Should all do. All right then. So we're coming sort of quite close to the end of the magazine. Move over. A good picture there of Pat Jennings and Billy Bingham.
Yep.
Northern Ireland goalkeeper and manager.
Yeah. Jennings was a great keeper, all right. Great cup. He had a great World Cup in '86 for Northern Ireland. He's a superb footballer.
Yeah. And of course, there's World of Soccer, so just wee bits and pieces of results. And this would be a sort of fellow European football kind of thing, this page and match. Who was top of the league in Italy, etc. in Spain.
I see Atletico are top of the league there in Spain.
Yeah.
Very mirroring the present day.
And just unfortunately for Scotland, Costa Rica finally qualifying for their first ever World Cup finals after a nail-biting wait. The sixth country to qualify for next year's tournament, Costa Rica, actually finished their qualifying programme in July, but had to wait for the outcome of the remaining matches in their group. A goalless draw between Guatemala and the United States earlier this month finally meant Costa Rica could not be overtaken. And then, of course, they beat Scotland in the opening game in the 1990.
I do remember that. Yeah, Jesus.
They actually qualified out of that group as well.
Yeah.
But quite a shock to us at the time, because obviously we'd no idea if they were any good or not, and we expected a comfortable victory. But
yeah. I remember that was a shocker when all right. Yeah, Jesus. And was that Scotland had by then still they were struggling to get out of group stages in World Cups and major tournaments by then?
Yeah, we've never got out of group stage. No.
Is that still the case?
Yeah, it's still the case. Yeah, we've never got out of the group.
Oh my God, geez, it has to change. I noticed in the next page. There's the gloves. Yeah, I see Hans van Breukelen. He's got the set of gloves there. He was playing in Holland when Niall Quinn scored that goal against him in the I think the 78th minute, which I talked about earlier on when we were chatting, and how the last 12 minutes of that game was just a complete farce because neither of us needed to win, and it was just Hans van Breukelen booting it up to Packy Bonner and back. So it's nice to see his gloves again, because they were gloves he let drop essentially a long ball, and it span into Niall Quinn's path, and that's how he scored. So it's good to see the gloves that handed us the goal.
Yeah, so there's a lot of Rush gloves there, and names of the goalkeepers, I guess, who wore them at the time: Ian Andrews Panther, David Seaman Superflex, David Seaman Personal, Dave Besant Personal, Billy Thompson, Brian Gunn, Chris Woods, and there's other wee goalkeeper jerseys and a goalkeeper cap, pro pants and long johns.
The cap. See, I never got the caps. I was a goalkeeper, and anytime I wore a cap, as soon as the action came towards my goal, I'd take the cap off and throw it away. So it was absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I know why it's there, it's to keep the sun out, but it just, for me, it just wasted. It messed about with your peripheral vision and things like that, and I was never comfortable doing it. So as soon as the ball got anywhere near the penalty box, it was boom, throwing it away. Wasted.
Very rare these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, so that's got to the end of the magazine then.
Excellent. So what's happening with yourself at the moment?
Well, the collection of short stories are out and about, and hopefully people are buying them, what have you. And I'm working then on a novel that's due out next year in Ireland and in the UK. And the book I wrote last year was shortlisted for a book prize, and the winner will be announced Saturday week, on the 2nd of June, and it's a €15,000 prize for the winner. So obviously, I dearly hope I've won it.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
I got shortlisted anyway, so it was nice to get shortlisted at least. So that's the kind of main stuff. I'm taking a few weeks off at the moment now because I just sent my last book the last edit to my editor in Ireland. So I'm just going to take a few weeks off. I've been working pretty hard of late, so yeah, time to recharge, as to say. So it was nice chatting to you two lads.
Yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. But yeah, as Tom says, I just want to thank you. It's been really, really enjoyable. So thank you for taking your time out and going through the magazine with us.
Not at all. My pleasure. Lovely chatting to you, and sure, hopefully we might meet someday in person.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate your time.
Super. Thank you both as well.
Cheers. Take care.
Cheers.
Very best with your projects. See you now.
A charity partner this season is the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money, and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook, or West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/short Shoot the Breeze, one word. Also, keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the story of the blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank. And I'd like to say thank you to Tom for being Tom.
Thank you, Andy.
And thanks to everyone for listening. And please, as always, follow the podcast, share it with your friends, get involved. Until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.